Powered by Red Media in partnership with TSN. This is season 6 of the Ray and Dregs hockey podcast. I know it only feels like 5.5, but yeah, this is episode 1 of season 6 of Ray and Dregs, presented by our title sponsor, Ray Canadian Club Whiskey. And I don't know if you've had the opportunity to taste it yet. The Invitation Series, the Canadian Club Classic 18-year-old high proof. So it just arrived at the doorstep, and I got to be careful because, hey, we're Ray and Dregs, so of course we're going to get the sample early. It's not on the shelves yet. Right. It's coming up. I think it'll hit the shelves towards the end of October, but oh my goodness.
Your review? Because I was in the other bottle the other night.
So I'm going to read to you the description that Canadian Club gave us to try and, again, describe what the classic 18-year-old high proof tastes like. Full-bodied, with aromas of caramel, toffee, spicy vanilla, rich oak, with a butterscotch finish, so smooth. So I'm reading this, and of course the marketing people want you to, this is what it's supposed to taste. That's exactly what it tastes like. And so I was careful.
You said there's a little zip to it, eh?
Little zip. That's why it's called the high proof. But I didn't even look. The bottles are beautiful, right? You and I have talked about this.
Spectacular.
It's impressive. Every time you open that thing up, you're like, this is a work of art. Anyway, you get the spiciness. And then, I'm like, high proof. I wonder what does that mean? And you look at the percentage on the bottle. It's 58%. So I'm like, ooh, okay, this is a sipper. This is just a nice, smooth sipper. So look forward to it. The Canadian Club Classic 18-year-old high proof, again, on the shelf in October. We've got Paul Maurice coming up in episode 1. Of course, he's the head coach of the Florida Panthers, now the defending Stanley Cup champions. So looking forward to that chat. But first, how was your summer, my friend? Did you have some family time, lots of golf? What do you occupy your days?
We had a great summer. Had 60th birthday, 20th wedding anniversary. We went to Italy for a week. Our youngest guy, Reese, had it was a soccer exchange, so they got to go meet some other kids and play some soccer. We were in Italy, up in Verona. It was amazing, beautiful place up there, and we will go back and played lots of golf, some good. Got to Bandon Dunes again, which was amazing.
Was
I
that
just
Kenny in
loved
the group?
that place. Yes, and we were down there, and there's 20 guys, and it was super fun. And then I'd say the capper to the summer was 3 nights ago. My neighbor walks over and says, "Hey, what are you doing on Saturday?" And I'm like, "Oh, nothing." He said, "I just want to invite your wife and you to a little get-together party I'm having." I said, "Oh yeah." He says, "We got some live music." He doesn't really go into much detail. And so at 6:00 at night, I'm literally on the other side of the fence. I'm listening to this music, and somebody's warming up for the party, and I'm like, "Geez, that's Sarah McLachlan."
Come on.
And so literally across the fence, she was her music school was having a fundraiser, and a company that's the title sponsor of her music school, which is in her 23rd year, was hosting. So I walked around the fence. She played 8 or 10 songs. It was amazing. Wow. And she is just phenomenal. And it was a great night. So that was kind of the end of summer, and now talking to you.
Not a bad way to wrap up the summer. Well,
you get to the Cabbage, I assume?
We did. We pitted in. We spent the better part of almost 7 weeks, in fact. And there's a number of different highlights and whatnot. So we had some good friends of ours from Ontario come and visit. 2 couples, Jeff and Val, and Bob and Ange, and they were excited about the idea of seeing a bear. Okay. Like an animal, not something bear. Get it? No, a bear. Anyway, morning.
Your work on that?
Yeah, sorry. The morning they're about to leave, so the bedroom downstairs that Bob and Ange were staying in, outside the window is, you're looking through the window, you're looking at the lake, but there's a cedar outdoor shower there. And then Holly has a bunch of hanging plants that are hanging off the upper deck. So it's a walkout basement, right? Well, 6:30 in the morning, I hear this commotion down below. All of a sudden, Bob comes running up the stairs. I mean, is everything okay? He goes, there's an enormous bear right outside our window. So this big black bear rumbles in and decides he likes the smell of the hanging plant right in front of their window. So he gets on his hind legs and is trying to grab a hold of the hanging plant. So they got a firsthand look at bear activity in Manitoba. And you know what? The thing just ambled away. There's no harm, no foul.
They're not bothering anybody, but man, they're big.
So the highlight of the summer for me, okay, we're driving back. We've got Tiny the Great Dane in the back of my truck. You've heard of Neepawa, Manitoba, right? Like,
yeah.
Heavy Evison, remember Heavy, Dean's brother, Heavy. God rest his soul.
What a good person.
Such
Heavy
a
was.
good
Funny,
dude,
man.
He was head coach back in the day of the Manitoba Junior Hockey League team in Neepawa. So every time I drive through Neepawa, I think of Heavy going through there. Holly loves Neepawa because they've got a Dairy Queen right on the side of the highway. So every time we zip through, we have to pull off, and she needs to get what do they call
it's a blizzard.
A blizzard. There you go. A Score blizzard.
Are you kidding me? Score. Does she get Score?
She gets Score.
It's the best. Yeah. It is the Hall of Fame of blizzards.
So she gets her Score blizzard. We get back on the highway. Now we're just outside Winnipeg. We stop. We've got to let Tiny out. Holly starts rooting around looking for her cell phone. No, doesn't have the cell phone, which isn't unusual because she loses it 17 times a week.
Okay.
Grabs my phone, calls the Dairy Queen in Neepawa. She left it in the wash. We're 2 hours from Neepawa.
Oh. How long's this drive to start with?
Wow.
This is phenomenal.
It's a 4 hour, so we're 4 hours from the Cabbage.
How long is the drive? So the trip is how long? Cabbage to home?
30 hours. 30.
Not anymore.
Well, so I'm like, we're going to spend way too much time together for me to get grumpy. So I'm like, we're not going back. So this is the reason I tell the story, not at the expense of Holly. The good people, and I assume it's the owner of the Neepawa Dairy Queen, purelates the phone to our home. Like, no questions asked. Just like, normally I think it's just an example of the good people that still are out there, right? And I mean, it cost them money to courier because they couldn't do it COD. They couldn't, like, they had to pay the $80 to put this thing in a courier to get it to Brooklyn, Ontario, Canada. And the phone actually ended up. So this is a shout out to the people at the Dairy Queen in Neepawa who saved us a whole lot of.
I'm going to say, Dregs, you need to send something out there that can be hanging in their store.
Yeah. Well, you know what we're going to send? Look at the nice hat that you're wearing for all of those who follow us on our YouTube channel. The new Ray and Dregs swag is out.
Well, you got to give Rashad credit. I mean, it took him 18 kicks in the shins, countless emails and phone calls to even just get to the starting line.
I haven't got mine yet. Apparently, there's
must be coming soon, right?
It
must be coming soon.
So. Yeah. All right, so we've got Paul Maurice Ray coming up, but first I want to get to headlines, again brought to us by our good friends at Tim Hortons. There's a delicious new deal at Tim's. Get a $3 classic breakfast sandwich with the purchase of any size hot or cold coffee. Now that's a pairing you just cannot ignore. Head to your local Tim Hortons today. So many different ways we're not going to look back because so much stuff went on this offseason. I don't know where we'd begin. We'd be doing a disservice for the hockey fans. So let's focus on the here or the now and maybe look a little bit forward. We know that often restricted free agent negotiations are tricky business, right? Sometimes they go well. I mean, the Dylan Guenther extension to me was a bit bizarre.
That came out of nowhere for me.
It did for everybody, including managers across the NHL. They're sitting there going, wow, hey, he's a good player. And good on Utah for locking him up. Obviously, they see something in this young man that they want to commit to long term. But that's not the case with what's going on in Winnipeg. You've got Cole Perfetti who's still duking it out with management there, trying to get a bridge deal done. not more importantly, because Perfetti's important to the Winnipeg Jets, are you as surprised as I am at the strange workings of the Boston Bruins with Jeremy Swayman? I mean, you trade Linus Ullmark to the Ottawa Senators. It felt at that time, at that point early in the summer, okay, well, an extension for Swayman's got to be right around the corner. Undisputedly, he's the number one, has to be the number one goaltender for the Boston, and yet here we are. We're late September, and Jeremy Swayman is not under contract. Formality or surprised it hasn't been?
Oh, it's not a formality now. Once camp starts, players tend to fall behind a little bit. I would say that from the player's perspective, when they can't understand sometimes why a deal doesn't get done. They're looking at only themselves. The manager's looking at that giant whiteboard in his office that's got contracts stretched out for 5 and 7 years, and they've got to make everybody's dollars fit.
Yeah.
Now, but not just for this year, but for the coming years and the coming contracts they have to sign. Mm-hmm. That's all well and good, but Jeremy Swayman is a special goalie. He is, in my opinion, he's one of the very best in the league.
Yeah.
And the Bruins can't trick themselves into thinking that their culture and their team play will overcome the loss of both Ullmark and Swayman. Those goalies were an enormous part of the success the Bruins have had in the past couple of years. Remember when Bergeron left and Krejci left, it was, I thought there was going to be a quite a significant drop-off, and those goalies saved them. They did until they got organized again. And they went out and made some couple of free agent signings. They got Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov in particular. But you can dig your heels in as much as you want. Eventually, you have to get Swayman signed.
Yeah.
And I know Don Sweeney in his press conference, he threw out December 1st 3 times.
Yeah, he did.
The agent and the player are well aware that if you don't get signed by December 1st, that you don't play. Like I'm sure it's not, you can say whatever it was. You can say it's information he's giving. No, it's a threat.
Yeah, it is.
The threat is, hey, you don't get signed by December 1st, you're not going to play. And we're willing to talk about that. If they're going into the season with Jonas Korpisalo and Brandon Bussi as their goaltending tandem, they're going to fall behind. They're going to fall behind quick because Jeremy Swayman, in my opinion, Jeremy Swayman is a difference maker for them. And it's imperative they find the number. I wonder, what are they talking about here in salary difference? Are we talking about $1 million a year? Are we talking about 1.5 a year? Are we talking about, full term extension versus 4-year extension? Like the parameters have been a little gray, and that's up to them they don't need to negotiate in public.
No. But to your point, they've got to get it done. And I mean, Bruins fans, I'm sure, are hopeful. And it's going on a month now. Cam Neely came out point blank and said it's going to get done. So that was either, a directive to his manager, Sweeney, get it done, or a level of confidence based on what he knows internally that there's a good amount of dialogue. But they're grinding and still grinding. On the ice, I watched the Leafs and the Senators last night, Ray. Toronto dressed basically their NHL lineup. They did. Max Pacioretty is there on a PTO, scores a couple of goals, look pretty good. They lose to the Ottawa Senators, who primarily dress their young guys. But it was interesting.
Nice overtime goal. Sorry.
Not bad.
Nice overtime goal. Nice little roll.
It was interesting to hear Craig Berube post-game. We're not going to read too much into preseason hockey here, but he talked about the slow start and the laziness in the first period. Well, you can tell that's not going to fly for Craig Berube, but it does seem like it's something that has nagged this group in Toronto. Do you have a different vibe, a different feel for the Maple Leafs, or are you expecting kind of the same old, even with the number of changes that we've seen here?
No, I don't feel a different vibe, but I think it will be different.
Like positively.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
different.
Okay.
Like I could see, you know, when Florida scored 8 million goals 3 years ago, and then they brought in Paul Maurice, and they gradually changed the way they play,
Yeah.
and it kind of happened even though you knew it was happening, it kind of happened sort of under the radar. Like the change was in the style of play. It was change in usage of players and what was demanded and what was accountable. It all kind of changed a little bit, and then it changed a little bit more, and pretty soon Florida doesn't play the way they used to play.
Right.
And that's how I see the the road with Berube. If it's to be successful, you can't come in and take um, a group of players that are what they are,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't make them play a different way. You can hold them as accountable as you want, but it's going to take some time to change the style, change the expectation. Maybe, um, maybe you don't have players um, playing the minutes they played before, but they play different minutes.
Right.
I would suggest that watching Berube's teams play, that the goal will be a hardness to the game that hasn't been there in the past.
Right.
Now, can they achieve it with this group? We'll see. But the slow starts, the you know the mistakes that maybe were made in the past that he will want to change.
Yeah.
Like that's going to take a little time, and for the Leafs and their fans, I guess you hope that in 2 or 3 months it doesn't quite look like it used to look. It's just different and maybe more complete. I mean, I think Sheldon Keefe wanted to get there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just didn't happen. And I believe that's Berube's goal.
Yeah. Well, the Montreal Canadiens look a bit different, right? I would submit a risky ad in making the Patrik Laine trade with the Columbus Blue Jackets, but risky only in the sense that he's got a couple more years left on his contract. Do you see?
Do you know how long it's been since he scored 30 goals?
Well, yeah. I mean, what is it?
6 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I read it. I went back and checked. And of course, injury, and he was away from the team and such in Columbus last year. But all of a sudden, you're not looking at a young guy anymore.
Yeah.
And that surprised me. I had in my head it wasn't that quite that long.
Yeah. And look, I mean, Montreal was in a position where they thought they were getting a first round pick with Patrik Laine in that trade. They ended up getting a second with Laine, and then Harris goes back to the Columbus Blue Jackets. But the reason it made sense from Columbus's standpoint is there was no money retention, right? So beyond Laine, though, when you look at that blue line, and man, they've got some interesting young pieces with Lane Hudson, Logan Mailloux, Reinbacher. Like, go down the list of all these guys. And does this make sense to you? Because this is how Kent Hughes explained it to me. They have to be mindful and careful with their young defense, but they also need those guys to get meaningful minutes this season, because it's not about 24-25 this season. It's about making sure those young guys are ready to roll in 25-26. That's going to be tricky stuff for the coaching staff to manage. Maybe Lane Hudson at 5'9" and change doesn't play every back-to-back, right? I mean, you make sure that there's load management on these guys.
Well, the best part is like they're patient in Montreal too. So
oh yeah, sure.
Especially because there's now excitement. Like you can feel the accumulation of prospects. You can feel there's like players that play a certain way that excite the fans, and yet take a look around and how many teams with a defense with 3 21-year-olds do well? And the answer is none. Because it's so hard. And so it's really the view you have to take when you're trying to rebuild as they are, like not trying to change on the fly and add legit NHLers. They're like, okay, we're going to plug these young guys in. They're excited about Hudson, and then the 2 first rounders, Reinbacher and Mailloux. and they're hopeful that they can all kind of mature at the same rate.
Yeah.
And there's a GM had told me, like, one of the ways that you build is that you accumulate as many players in the same age group as you can, and hope that they mature at the same way. Like, you can't have you can't have 6 29-year or 27 to 29-year-olds and a bunch of 20-year-olds and then nothing in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You want to accumulate this talent base so that they mature together, and when they hit, they're all ready to be impact guys. And I think that's probably what Kent is talking about in Montreal. It's like, it's hard to do, though. You got to accumulate the guys first.
Yeah.
And then you have to hope that you can coach them up to a level where they can be effective players most nights.
I know you want to talk about the New York Rangers, but let's do that maybe later in the week in episode 2, because New York is an interesting story across the board with all the guys that are in the final year of their contracts.
Yeah, 13 of them.
Yeah, it has to be an all-in approach for Chris Drury and company there. So we'll spend a bit more time in the Rangers later in the week. Wrapping up headlines with tragedy, which is deeply sad, as we know, the tragic loss of Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau. You know, everything about this season, Ray, I'm sure you feel it. So many people have mentioned this around the world of hockey, not just the NHL, how everything feels marred. You know, it's just, there's just this obvious dark cloud. And I'm not sure why, but I struggle even looking into February and the Four Nations and envisioning Team USA without Johnny Gaudreau on the ice. I don't know. I mean, is there any way of putting this in perspective aside from the obvious enormity of the family's loss, the friends' loss, the teammates' loss, organizationally, everything that has gone into this?
Lots of words get used lots of times, and sometimes, like, they just mean more. And, you know, like, you can say it was, you know, a game was a certain, you know, a devastating loss, or, you know, whatever word you want to describe this tough loss. What happened with Johnny and Matthew and the way that they were killed was unfathomable.
Yeah.
It was devastation to a family, to several families. And each time a piece of the news came out, it seemed to get a little more heavy and tragic. And I mean, there's no real way to pass condolences on deeply enough to all of the Gaudreaus, their parents, their siblings, their wives, their children, their unborn child. Like, it's when I see a little highlight somewhere on social media of a goal that Johnny scored, or it kind of makes me sit up a little bit, you know. And I'll remember, one thing I will remember about Johnny was I did the game when Columbus came back into Calgary, his first game.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a joy to him that day about playing the game. He had, I don't know, half a dozen chances that would not go in. And he kept coming back to the bench, and he was like, he leaned over a couple times. He's like, can you believe that? Like, he just couldn't believe the puck wouldn't go. But there was a joy to the way he was playing this game. He loved it in Calgary. He loved playing there. He loved going to Columbus because it was closer to his family. And the two things had intersected. And I think I will, of the great things that he did on the ice, I never knew Matthew, but I will remember that day. It's just my little tiny little piece to knowing Johnny that I'll remember that.
Fantastic story and a perfect tribute. Those are the headlines brought to you by Tim Hortons.
A new deal is at Tim's. $3 for a classic breakfast sandwich when you buy any size hot or iced coffee. You heard that right, just $3 for a classic breakfast sandwich with Canada's favorite coffee. A $3 deal you won't want to miss.
It's time for Tim's.
Our interviews on Ray and Dregs are brought to us by the new Canadian Club Classic 18-year-old high-proof full-bodied whiskey, The aromas of caramel toffee, spicy vanilla, rich oak, with a butterscotch finish that is just so smooth. It's on the shelf in October. All right, Raymond, how lucky are we? We've got Paul Maurice, Stanley Cup champion, joining us here. Episode 1. How's it going, Coach? You look like you're basically sitting in, if not your office at the practice facility, some sort of room kind of overlooking the ice. You ready for a new year?
Yeah, I got a treat here. I'm in the management section of the building here today, so it's the overlooking down, and we got a brand new facility here. They opened it up.
Yeah.
Actually, we opened it up, I think, December 21st last year, and we won the next 9 games. So it's been a good spot for us. It's pretty nice.
Well, we'll get to the cup in a second. You talk about the practice rink briefly. I got in it last year, and man, Paul, it's spectacular. And it's amazing what's happened in the last 5, 6, 7 years in Florida. And maybe talk a little bit about how it's become just a different place to play as opposed to just one of the 32 teams.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about that is that sometimes we forget. So you're 100% right. I mean, all 4 of us remember going into those buildings when things aren't going well and there's nobody in the stands, and people then project that, well, the franchise isn't where it needs to be. But you'll remember, Ray, but my second year in Hartford, we would go into Chicago, there'd be 5,000 people in the place. I mean, that building, and people would never assume that now, right? And it's almost true, with the exception of the 2 or 3 maybe iconic buildings in the league, the Torontos and Montreals of the league. For the most part, everybody goes through that possibly at some times, and they build a franchise. We certainly went through it in Carolina, just building it from the ground up, starting in Greensboro to what they've got an incredible fan base there now. And then we're still in the process of building it. We've had 3 really strong years. You go back even before I got here, the year before I got here, in terms of excitement. I mean, they scored a whole lot of goals. They won the President's Trophy. So when you play a game that the fans love, and our game is considerably different now maybe than it was 3 years ago, it's still really enjoyable to watch. I've said a lot. I mean, I would pay everything I have to watch Boston and Florida go at it every night, because it's just incredible hockey. So we're building a couple of things, and you guys have both also seen that kind of non-traditional market come in, and what happens is they start living there, and then their kids start playing hockey, and then the program builds, and the next thing you know, you're drafting guys out of that program. And that's the commitment here by Vinny Viola, put an awful lot of money into this facility. And it's not just for the Florida Panthers, right? You have now the youth program starting up. That's really, I think, where the power comes from, beyond having good seasons, because nobody wins every year. But when you can get the youngsters involved in the game, they fall in love with it, and then the families show up.
Did you watch much of the final?
I'll tell you the truth. I haven't watched Game 7.
Honestly?
No. You know what?
It was close,
No, I heard it was a tight one. You guys remember my good friend Kevin McCarthy, and when he won the cup in Carolina, and him saying the best part about it was he didn't have to do video for 2.5 months. So about 6 weeks after, so it was really incredible summer. It ran so late. The draft was that weekend. July 1st hit on the Monday. So we took off, and Darren knows where I am in the summer. We get up to the Lake of the Woods. So I was up there about July 6th, and I got actually a longer break this year than I've ever had, because we didn't come back until about the 3rd week in August. But right around the 1st week in August, we had some friends up, and my wife had her iPad out, and she was going through all the pictures and the videos that got sent from kind of the bench and in the building. I'd never seen any of it. I'm sitting at the other end of the table. I got tears rolling down my face, because I'd never seen any of it. It was kind of I got to relive it again. So
awesome.
It was certainly an incredible emotional stretch.
What was your day with the cup like?
So one of the deals, right? I had a couple things in my head. When you get 30 years to kind of fantasize about what it's going to be like, so it doesn't come early. Wanted to call my mom and dad from the ice, and I wanted the cup day to be my wife's, because she's been married to me. Can you imagine that for that long? So we had a couple things happen. It was the 18th of August, and on the 17th, my nephew got married in the Detroit area. My wife's from across the river. So we had our cup day there, which, just to cut down on travel for everybody, we invited everybody that I was related to, and then a couple other people. One of them was Mr. Kermanis, Peter Kermanis, junior that had won the cup, and he brought his four teenage boys there to see his name on the cup. And then everybody after that was people at my wife's family and people that she had taught with and all that. So it was absolutely wonderful. Like, to give you an idea, like, there'd be so many people up there. My wife's mother's from a family of 11. So there's 7 boys and only one of them is left. And he's toward the end of it now. Needed a walker to get there, but it's like out of the movies, right? Moves the walker side, comes up, kisses the cup, tears rolling down his face. And his whole family then is in behind watching that. Grandkids, great. Like, it was just awesome, is the short answer. Watching the people around you interact with something like that, especially when you get up north there and people who've lived with seeing the cup presented every year, to be in the same room with it, it was very special.
So now you have to try and defend it, right? And how many times have we heard historically, guys, where teams will say, well, the hardest thing to do isn't just to win it. Then it's trying to defend as Stanley Cup champions. And why do you think that is? Is it because everybody involved knows the investment that is needed, that is essential to get there?
I don't know if this is true, but I'll give you the philosophy I've come up with. Called a lot of people this summer and kind of through the spectrum of people in hockey. So obviously Jim Rutherford's got 3, so there's a call there, president, GM, there's other coaches, but especially into like the trainers and the medical guys that I've worked with that have won Stanley Cups. And there's this idea of this Stanley Cup hangover. I don't think it's any harder to win it. It's back to back. It's exactly as hard as it was the year before. So we were joking that I hadn't watched Game 7, but I watched every other game very, very closely. The number of times so I'll give you an example. So one of the days in our first 3 days, we do kind of rush offense at some point, how we get pucks to the net. So we're showing about 8 or 9 of our rush goals. But what's really cool is looking the score at the clock. 1-1, 2-2, 8 minutes left to go in the third. And this goal goes in. So after you win, well, you won 6-2 or 4-2, you won it in 6 games, you won it in 6 games. There's 1,000 events in a 2-month period where it could go the other way on you. Just go back to the game, the Stanley Cup winning goal. Dmitry Kulikov knocks that away from an empty, gets buried into the net. Reinhart goes down and scores. So you got to get all those things to line up series after series after series, and that's why it's so hard. The margin. So what happens is you win the Stanley Cup and you get this greatness attached to you, and I understand that. It's a wonderful, beautiful thing. These guys will walk together forever. But that could have gone sideways 1,500 different times. It felt like in the series when you go back and watch. It's just as hard. There's no hangover for the Florida Panthers. There's not. We tested better in our fitness test at the start of the year than we did the year before and the year before that. So their bodies are in better shape now than they were a year ago. Is it mentally tougher? No, it's mentally as tough, but your perspective has completely changed on what it should feel like. So you accept that idea that you're special, that you're great, that this somehow should get easier. And then when it's not, when it's just as hard as it was last year, you think something's wrong. There's nothing wrong. There's going to be a grinder. The story that we tell is we went into November in each of our last 2 years on the road in the Western Conference against a team that wasn't going to make the playoffs. And we lost both times. We got our butts kicked. We play that team in November this year, and if we lose that game, it'll be the hangover. The last 2 years, it was just a step along the way. It was a bit of adversity. It was us building our game. Now there's something clearly wrong. It's the exact same thing. So I'm going to say it's just as hard, but that doesn't make it any easier.
Do you and your coaches, do you refresh the message? Do you change it at all? Is it the same thing? Is it? I'm always interested because you do have some new players,
right?
So that'll freshen up a little bit. You did lose some key people,
right?
But it's a new year, so how do you approach that?
So we specifically don't change anything in our first 4 on-ice days. So we have a structure for our camp that's changed a little bit because we played our back-to-back yesterday on a Sunday instead of a Monday, but we have 5 very, very hard days to start, and everybody competes in them. That's why we play all our veterans in the first exhibition game, so they all eat the same sandwich. They all get a bite of it, and we actually run the exact same drills to the exact same duration because we measure it. We can measure the load in our practices in this facility. We can measure on both rinks the cost of the practice and then we'll take a look at those numbers and say, so at this point, we know how hard we've worked, and then almost how hard they push themselves beyond what we ask. So what we ask is the exact same drills, the exact same duration. I'm probably not yelling as much at this camp, and it's not because I'm casual about what I'm doing. There's not as much to correct in the basics of our game. So then when we're integrating these new players, they need to go right back to the basics of what we do. So we would start with our defensive components, which is the key part of our game, and we run the exact same days. Now, we'll look to add things, Ray. Like we think there's parts of our game we'd like to see that we think we can get more out of, but we won't do that till probably late in camp before we start talking about that stuff.
Do you, camps have changed, man, so much over certainly your 30 years, but even just in the last 5 or 7 years, do you like the way camps are and the number of exhibition games, or would you like to see the games squeezed up a little bit, or what's your view?
Well, first, everybody's is different. So we bring a smaller camp in, and that maybe is just we're going to kind of continuing the process because we like what we've done. But when you first come into a team, bringing in 70 guys doesn't help anybody. So we bring in two teams, but they're loaded teams. So we go 5 lines, 8D. We bring 2 teams. We run practices. We don't scrimmage. We'll get into the middle block. So a guy like Barkov for us is maximum 3 exhibition games, and because he plays the first one, that means that leaves us 2 more. I think a lot of it would have to do is where you feel you are in the progression of your team. If you've got a younger team, you want to expand, you're probably drafting higher. You've probably collected more draft picks, so you're bringing in way more kids. We only really have 2 draft picks basically in here right now, and they've been very good. So we'll probably keep them a little longer than we originally thought. But we can run this I'm not trying to get cut down as early as we possible. We'll run a 2 scrimmage camp, probably straight through another 7 to almost 10 days. And some of that is we play 8 exhibition games. It was a lot. But when you think about it, because we have the doubleheader, we only have 7 opportunities for these guys to play. I'll save the last one because we're up in Quebec City. I'll bring just about everybody on that trip. We'll load the group up. It's more of a team building thing. So then that gets down to 6 games where you can prove yourself. That's not a huge number. And we'll give legitimate guys, 5 and 6 games to try to make this team.
Paul, let's just go back to the Stanley Cup final for a moment here again. I want to look at it from the other side, right? I mean, you've been there, you know how difficult it is to get there, the pain of losing and all of that. We'll zone in on Connor McDavid for obvious reasons, but in that series, was there anything that you learned about McDavid that maybe you didn't know, that you had to see in a Stanley Cup final?
Well, I'll share this story and then I'll ask Aaron Ekblad permission for this after. But in early in game 1, he tight turns on the wall and comes off the wall right into the slot on Aaron. And he gets a great chance off him, but he was like 15, 20 feet past him by the time he turned him on the corner. So I just slide over to Aaron the next day, and I'm joking, right? It's light. What's going on? He goes, you know what? You think you know? He goes, I know how fast that guy is. I know how fast that guy is. And then you don't know when you get back on the ice the next time, right? Like we are, and I said this at the start, completely desensitized to this guy's greatness and his uniqueness, because you just see it. I mean, look, I coach 1 of 32 teams, and I've seen him go through our entire team twice. So we're a pretty good defensive team. So if that happens, let's just say on average that happens to every other team twice, right? So that's 31. So 62 times he's done something ungodly on the ice, and we don't even talk about it anymore. It used to get played 50 times. Now it's just, we play it on a Tuesday and you can't find it on a Wednesday. So I've never seen anybody in my life generate that speed. I'll tell you another story.
Yeah.
We played, when I was in Winnipeg, we played Edmonton, and we're doing our PK video before the series start, and they run a long drop there. So they'll drive it right up the ice and then they kick it all the way back to McDavid. But by the time he picks that thing up the tops of the circles in his end, he is going so fast. So Charlie Huddy's doing the video, and there's really not anything to say. So it gets real quiet, right? Like there's not really a plan here, how we're going to shut this thing off. And then you just hear the guys start laughing. Like there's a slow giggle almost in the room. And I don't remember which defenseman it said. This about 5 seconds later, he said, I'm just going to turn around when he hits the far blue, see if I can meet him at the post. And that was our game plan. That was pretty much, there was no coach, and I was just kind of, okay, that's a good idea. Let's move on. That's how good he is.
So good.
Oh, did you get any calls from anyone, Paul? I just thought of this, like somebody that just kind of blew you away that you didn't expect or had kind of forgotten. Yeah, I mean, you probably had a load of calls, but somebody that just really surprised you.
I got, maybe not from a specific person. So right around 2 weeks after, Dregs will tell you this, I usually change my phone number every 2 or 3 years, right? Just to kind of narrow who's got my number. Right about 2 weeks after the Cup, I realized the cat was out of the bag, and every single person I'd ever talked to's got my number, which was great, right? You spend a lot of time answering texts. And I don't know these people, so I can't use their names. But the number of letters that I got that were like incredibly heartfelt. And somehow, I got a letter from a guy in California. I don't know him, never met him. But in about 3 paragraphs, he almost detailed my entire life, like exactly the things that I was going through and how much he enjoyed watching it. And then, the congratulations. There were a bunch of like cards, not asking for an autograph, not asking for a response, and almost sometimes saying, please don't answer me back. You're too busy right now. But that you felt you got a glimpse of what sports does for other people, right? We get all caught up because we're inside it, but the idea that a family, watched it and maybe learned lessons from players like Aaron Ekblad's change in his game, how much he's improved over the course, how much he's been willing to sacrifice for the team. You get these people that have a glimpse into your room, having never been there, that shocks you how coherent the idea is, and they've never been near us. And so that was the thing that I enjoyed the most, was reading some of the congratulation letters of people who somehow seem to know exactly what we went through.
Have you got a plan for opening night for the rings? Or I guess that happens just before opening night, but
I think so. Yeah, I don't.
You always got a plan. You've always got a plan.
You know what? They've got a bit of a history. So they've had 3 banner raisings since this will be our 3rd. So they won the President's Trophy 3 years ago in the Eastern Conference last year, and they've done it very respectfully, I think, to the other team. It hasn't been a big blowout. It's kind of the way I think Bill Zito likes to do those things. There's going to be another hockey team on the ice. We're not there to rub it in anybody's faces. The ring ceremony, I think, I don't know the details on it, other than we're going to try to share it with the fans as much as we possibly can.
Nice.
And then the banner raising will be very respectful to happens to be the Boston Bruins in the first night. We won the Cup. That was last year, and we're going to drop the puck in about 5 minutes.
Elbow room still standing, Paul?
I only drive by it now. Dregs too old to stop in, so it seems like it does a nice bit of business there, yeah.
Morning Looks after like your guys can swim. Hey, they can still swim, your guys. That's good to know.
All part of the training, part of the program here. Throw them in a riptide and see what happens. The first 20 guys out make the team.
8:15 a.m. after Game 7, I'm walking by the elbow room, and I was sure that Walt Keith Tkachuk was coming off the balcony. he had the cup in hand.
That made the video. So that's kind of it. So we had this, tell too many stories, I know, but so we didn't really, as you can imagine, have anything structured or planned if we were going to win. And that became just this great thing for us. So after the ice, the guys get in the locker room. Obviously, the champagne comes out, and basically stayed in the room the entire night. Never left the room. We didn't go to a restaurant. We didn't go upstairs. Like at 3 o'clock in the morning, Carter Verhaeghe's still in his full gear. He's taking his skates off. And then the families are in there. So that was this wonderful thing. And then you go home, right? So you drive home, and then you've lost the cup as the coach. The only thing I know what's going on is what I get on social media. You start to say, it's at the elbow room. It's gone for a swim. That was kind of cool. Tracking, it's like tracking Santa Claus at Christmas, right? You're tracking them online where the Stanley Cup is. You see your players. So we saw them that night. I saw them again at the parade, and that was it. They were gone.
That's terrific stuff. What do you love? We'll let you go here, Paul. What are you looking most forward to in the next several months here?
The every day of it, Darren, like the best way I can describe kind of what maybe possibly we've all been through in certain life, we've been chasing it for a little while. You've got this energy, this a source of energy that drives you every day. And if you haven't won, that's what drives you, right? That constant drive to get better. You lose a game, can't sleep, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, still got to get up at 5 to get the video done to drive. And you need an energy source for that. And then this happens, and all of a sudden you've got this completely different energy source. And it feels differently. It also feels way more powerful, that it's put things in a little bit of perspective, order. And I do not mean a casualness at all, like that you're going to take things easy. It's the opposite. I'm more worried, not that I can't get them past that casual threshold. It's more that extreme threshold where you think you should win every shift, every game, that you don't accept the hardness of the NHL game. That is like how hard it is.
Yeah.
We were fine losing 2 or 3 games in a row, having injuries, battling, blocking shots last year. I'm looking forward to those moments in the year that we hit that adversity to watch us. And I believe this group will do it, accept it. So those are the main points on my radar as in my role and what I do, is to be mindful of those thresholds, those two. Make sure we're not getting too happy that we won, and make sure we're not overreacting when it's not hard, when it's not easy for us.
Well, when you hit that adversity, we'll call back and we'll check in on you.
The day after, right? Right on. Well, I'll be here, hopefully.
All right, Paul. Always fun catching up. Thank you.
Congrats, Paul. Well, good luck this year, right?
Yeah,
See you soon.
See you guys.
All right, so head coach of the Florida Panthers, Paul Maurice, joining us in episode 1, season 6 of the Rain Dregs. And man, he's got that enthusiasm, doesn't he? Right? I mean, the energy is still very, very strong. And I guess it should be, as Paul talked about. He had a good summer, lots of time off, recharged, but also ready to take another run at this thing. And when you look at the Florida Panthers, I mean, why shouldn't they be considered a top contender again, right? Yeah, there's some change there. This is the backbone of the Florida Panthers is as good as it was going into the Stanley Cup final.
Well, he didn't forget how to do an interview, that's for sure. I just love the way he's able to express his wisdom that he's accumulated. And I love the stuff about there is no hangover for the Florida Panthers. It's just hard. It's just, this is the way it is. When we have a winning streak, that's great. And when we have a losing streak, we just plow ahead. And I'm fascinated, because I'm not a coach, to hear the detail that these guys think of things. And, like the first 5 days of camp are going to be exactly the same as last year. The drills are going to be the same time. Man, I'm telling you, as a player, you're out there, you have no idea how long the drills are, except when a coach sticks with a drill too long. Yeah. Guys always used to yell, change the record. Like, change the record. Let's move to the next drill. But what you do appreciate is the structure of it all. Like, it all feels familiar. And I'm sure there'll be times he gives them a little extra juice. Like, okay, we got to plug in here. We got to connect. And there'll be times when, you can get through the day a little easier. It does sound like they're going to approach this really in a business-like manner.
Yeah.
That they're not going to, it's just another season, yes, but they do have a banner hanging there, but they're not going to approach it too differently. I found that really, really pretty interesting.
And look, I think you and I we don't cheer for teams, we cheer for individuals, right? Yeah. I mean, of course, you're invested in certainly. I mean, your wife works for the Vancouver Canucks. You do a ton of Canucks games. I mean, it's more fun when the team that you're working closely with wins. In my world, I couldn't be happier for Paul Maurice. He's been a good buddy for a long, long time. That's why, all due respect to Edmonton, good people in Edmonton. I hope they win the Stanley Cup. But when you look back at Paul Maurice and the Florida Panthers hoisting us, it's not about cheering for Florida. And I'm glad that Paul, who's had a tremendous career and still has lots of years left, I'm glad he's got his name on the cup. He's one of the good ones.
There is, watching that, I did Game 7, did the finals last year, but watching them with the cup and all the people on the ice, like they were right in front of me, and watching people connect with their families out there. And Paul was, he wanted to call his parents from the ice with the cup, and it was really Billy Zito, every time he turned around, he started crying again. Like he was so happy. It was really, really awesome to see. It's one of the, watching somebody win like that is one of the great joys of doing the sport.
It is. Are you ready for any Ask Ray and Dregs anything? We don't have any questions yet. I'm just generalizing.
You should get them going. You know, we should get going on them. You know,
yeah, later this week.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Dregs, we got, you know, we're at episode 1 here.
I know.
You don't want to roll the whole ball out early, do you?
No. So you can send us your questions on X and Instagram at Ray and Dregs, or on the website rayanddregs.com, and we'll get to those later. What is your week? Look, I see Ryan, myself, Zuby, everyone associated with the Ray and Dregs podcast, just schedules around whatever the hell you're doing. So why don't you tell us when the next episode is, and then that'll tell me what I have to do this week.
Well, I'm pretty open. Because of, you know, light comes later in the, you know, like as we get into fall.
Okay.
Tea times don't open up till quite.
Of course. Yeah.
So 10:20 today I'm busy. Then I got to pick Reese up from school. I got a Zoom call on Wednesday. Geez, when you said what's the week look like?
Yeah, you had
I
no
opened
idea.
up my calendar. I'm like, oh, the Zoom call's Wednesday. I'm not quite clicked into things yet, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty open. Dregs, for you.
Yeah.
The world.
Okay.
What
are we looking at
day?
Thursday? What, like?
I think Thursday would be a
Okay.
good. Oh yeah, I got it written in here already. Podcast.
Episode 2. All right, and we'll
There we
have
are.
Ask Ray and Dregs anything. All right, buddy. Well, thanks for taking the time out this morning. Getting up super early, by the way, 6 a.m. Pacific to
It's
record
okay.
this
All right,
episode.
we get kids going to school here, chop pretty quick. I will know it. You know, Dregs, you've been through the teenagers. They're really helpful in the morning, eh?
Well, I got news for you. It doesn't get a whole lot better when they get into their early to mid 20s either. So that's where we're at.
So somebody's got to cook breakfast, and I say it like that, you know. Oh, somebody's got to cook breakfast. Like I used
You
to get
like
up
it.
early
Yeah.
when I was a teenager. We'd come downstairs. Mom, there was 4 boys. She would have a stack of toast that if it fell over, it would have knocked over everything else on the table. And if you didn't get there right on time, man, you were getting a lousy piece of bread. It was like they'd unleashed 4 hostages every morning. Peanut butter jam. It was like, you know, just gobble it in and out we go. So we weren't doing anything either.
No. All right, buddy. We'll have a good few days, and we'll reconnect
Will
on
do.
Thursday.
Good to see you again. Thanks everybody for listening to episode 1. Here we go for season 6.
And thank you to our sponsors who continue to support Ray and Dregs and make the podcast possible. Our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey and Tim Hortons. Till Thursday, stay safe, everybody.